Welcome to the all-new Hoop Nova, your ultimate source for everything basketball.
This ESPN report looks like a straightforward update on the NBA's investigation into the Clippers. But when you look closer, there may be a much bigger story behind it. The biggest question is simple: who leaked this information, and why now? The report came from Baxter Holmes and Ramona Shelburne, two reporters with deep connections to the Los Angeles basketball scene. More importantly, the information reportedly came from a private meeting between the Clippers and the NBA, where the league presented its findings roughly a month ago. The NBA itself later pushed back, saying the ESPN story contained numerous and significant inaccuracies, and noting that the league had declined to cooperate with the article. That makes it pretty clear that someone close to the Clippers had an interest in getting this information into the public eye. And the timing is extremely important. According to the report, the NBA has found no evidence that Clippers owner Steve Ballmer funneled money through team sponsors to Kawhi Leonard as a way to circumvent the salary cap. If that's true, Ballmer has every reason to be frustrated. From his perspective, if the league can't prove the central allegation, then why is the investigation still dragging on? Especially because the Clippers are reportedly working on a massive trade involving Kawhi Leonard and the Raptors. The proposed package reportedly includes Brandon Ingram, Grady Dick, and control of 3 first-round picks. That's an enormous return for a star whose availability and long-term value remain major questions. Every day this investigation continues is another day that deal could become more complicated, or the Raptors could become less willing to give up that kind of package. So if you're Ballmer, you have a huge financial and basketball incentive to get this situation resolved immediately. And that's where the ESPN report becomes interesting. The story says the investigation has shifted toward whether the Clippers failed to properly supervise employees. But here's the strange part. The report also says it's unclear what specific NBA rule the team violated or what penalties could even apply. That's a pretty remarkable situation. NBA teams are obviously allowed to introduce players to sponsors and business partners. So if the league isn't even sure which rule was broken, it's difficult to understand how that becomes the basis for a major punishment. From the Clippers' perspective, this is probably the exact message they wanted out there. The NBA hasn't found evidence of salary cap circumvention, and now it's searching for another reason to punish us. But that doesn't mean the underlying questions simply disappear. There is still a substantial amount of circumstantial evidence surrounding Kawhi Leonard's relationship with Clippers-connected sponsors. And that's where the story gets much more complicated. One of the most important pieces of evidence involves Kawhi's uncle and longtime advisor, Dennis Robertson, better known as Uncle Dennis. During free agency in 2019, Leonard's camp reportedly made significant demands to teams that wanted to sign him. Those demands allegedly included things such as ownership, private jet access, a house, and restrictions on sponsorship opportunities. The Raptors were reportedly willing to introduce Leonard to businesses that wanted to work with him, but his camp wasn't interested in doing traditional sponsorship deals. The issue becomes much more interesting because after Leonard joined the Clippers, he eventually became connected to several unusual sponsorship arrangements. That's where investigators would naturally start asking questions. The timing is another major part of the story. Leonard joined the Clippers in 2019, but the controversial sponsorship arrangements didn't immediately appear. Instead, they came later. In 2021, Leonard signed a 4-year extension worth roughly $176 million. Then, only months later, Aspiration began paying him. The Clippers also reportedly sent Aspiration approximately $30.4 million in April 2022. And on that exact same day, Leonard signed a $28 million sponsorship agreement with the company. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you're investigating possible salary cap circumvention, unusual timing is exactly the kind of thing investigators are going to examine. There was another controversial connection involving Daktronics, the company behind the Clippers' Halo scoreboard. Leonard reportedly received millions through another sponsorship arrangement while simultaneously taking less money on a Clippers extension. Again, none of that automatically proves that Ballmer or the Clippers broke NBA rules. That's the critical distinction. Circumstantial evidence can raise serious questions, but proving a salary cap violation requires something much stronger. The league would ideally want direct evidence showing that the Clippers intentionally used outside sponsorships to compensate Leonard for money he couldn't receive through his NBA contract. And that's where the Clippers have an obvious defense. Ballmer can argue that he simply introduced Leonard to companies, and whatever those companies later decided to do with Leonard was outside his control. Unless investigators can prove that the Clippers were directly involved in arranging compensation as part of Leonard's recruitment or contract negotiations, punishing the organization becomes much harder. That's why the Timberwolves comparison from 2000 is so important. In that case, Minnesota literally put evidence of its salary cap violations in writing. Commissioner David Stern had the kind of direct evidence needed to impose a major punishment. The Clippers' situation appears much murkier. There may be plenty of suspicious circumstances, but there isn't necessarily a smoking gun email from Ballmer saying, "Let's use this sponsor to get around the salary cap." And that creates a serious dilemma for Adam Silver and the NBA. If the league believes something improper happened but can't prove it conclusively, what exactly is it supposed to do? Punish the Clippers anyway and risk losing a legal or arbitration battle? Or close the investigation and potentially create the perception that wealthy owners can push the boundaries without consequences? Ballmer's position makes that decision even more difficult. He's one of the richest owners in professional sports, and if the NBA tries to impose a punishment he believes is unfair, he has the resources and motivation to fight it. A legal battle could lead to discovery, and discovery could force the league and teams to reveal sponsorship arrangements involving players across the NBA. Suddenly, this wouldn't just be about Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers. It could open questions about how many other teams have connected players with sponsors, business partners, or outside opportunities. The NBA clearly has no interest in turning one investigation into a league-wide examination of every questionable sponsorship arrangement. That's why this entire situation feels like a high-stakes game of pressure between Ballmer and Silver. Ballmer wants a clear resolution and complete exoneration. The NBA wants to make sure it doesn't establish a precedent that could weaken its salary cap rules. And sitting in the middle is Kawhi Leonard, whose potential trade value could be directly affected by how long this investigation continues. The biggest question now isn't simply whether the Clippers did something wrong. It's whether the NBA can actually prove it. If the league has no evidence of salary cap circumvention, then continuing the investigation without identifying a clear violation could become increasingly difficult to justify. And if this ESPN report really was leaked by someone close to the Clippers, it may have been designed to force the NBA to make that decision sooner rather than later. When Adam Silver became NBA commissioner, one of the first major crises he had to deal with was the Donald Sterling scandal. Sterling was exposed for making racist comments. Silver banned him from the league, and the NBA essentially forced him to sell the Clippers. Steve Ballmer then stepped in and purchased the team for $2 billion, a price many people considered an overpay at the time. But that decision completely changed the situation for the NBA. Instead of dealing with months or even years of ugly controversy surrounding Sterling, the league suddenly had a new owner who stabilized the franchise and moved the story forward. Ballmer didn't just buy the Clippers either. He became one of the NBA's most aggressive owners, spending heavily on the team and eventually building a state-of-the-art arena largely with his own money. Compared with owners who have fought their cities over arena funding, Ballmer has consistently shown that he's willing to spend. That's why the relationship between Ballmer and Silver becomes especially interesting if the league ultimately decides there isn't enough evidence to punish the Clippers over the Kawhi Leonard sponsorship controversy. Before this investigation, Ballmer was almost the perfect NBA owner from the league's perspective. But if the NBA believes something improper happened and still can't prove a clear salary cap violation, Silver has a difficult decision to make. The good news for the Clippers is that the most severe punishments appear extremely unlikely. A massive suspension, voiding contracts, or taking away multiple draft picks would require an extremely strong case. If the league can't establish that the Clippers deliberately circumvented the salary cap, those kinds of penalties would be difficult to justify. That could also clear the way for the proposed Kawhi Leonard trade to Toronto. And if that deal happens, the Raptors could immediately become a serious contender in the Eastern Conference. But there may still be one punishment that no commissioner can control: public perception. Kawhi Leonard's legacy could forever be connected to the controversy surrounding his Clippers recruitment, the aspiration sponsorship situation, and the decisions involving his uncle Dennis. Even if the NBA never officially finds him guilty of anything, fans may continue to look at those events whenever Leonard's career is discussed. The same could happen to Ballmer. He went from being viewed as a passionate, eccentric, ultra-rich owner who wanted to build the Clippers into a powerhouse to someone many fans may now view as an owner who pushed the limits of the rules and escaped a major punishment. And that perception could follow the Clippers for years. Critics will argue that this kind of thing happens throughout the NBA, but there is an important distinction. The unusual part of the Leonard situation wasn't simply that the Clippers introduced a player to sponsors. It's that Leonard's camp reportedly resisted traditional sponsorship opportunities while later becoming connected to unusual deals involving Clippers-related companies. Some of the evidence, including the newer Daktronics communications, may not be a smoking gun, but it still raises questions about how the relationships were handled. In reality, Leonard didn't need to do much. Even a basic social media appearance, a photograph, or a short promotional event could have made the sponsorship arrangements look more normal. Instead, the complete lack of traditional promotional activity made the situation appear much stranger. That's why so much criticism has fallen on Leonard and Dennis. And even if the Clippers eventually win everything on the court, that cloud could remain. Imagine the Clippers rebuild successfully, develop their young players, accumulate draft picks, and eventually sign a superstar free agent who turns them into a championship team. A portion of the fanbase will still say there was something shady happening behind the scenes. That's the strange thing about escaping punishment. Sometimes getting caught and paying the price allows people to eventually move on. If the league finds wrongdoing but never imposes a meaningful penalty, the accusations can follow an organization forever. There's another important factor here: the players' union. The NBA reportedly pushed back on the idea that simply introducing players to sponsors should be considered evidence of wrongdoing. According to the investigation, the union essentially viewed that argument as dead on arrival. That's significant because the NBA isn't only dealing with Ballmer. If the league tries to create a broad new standard around player sponsorships, it could also face resistance from the Players Association. So Silver may be trapped between two powerful forces: a billionaire owner willing to fight through arbitration, and a players' union determined to protect players' ability to earn money outside their NBA contracts. That makes the Clippers' investigation much bigger than just Kawhi Leonard. It could ultimately determine how far the NBA is willing to police sponsorship relationships across the entire league.